The first thing she noticed about him was his hand. Not his face, not the way he moved, not the lean, careful walk of a man who had recently been put back together and was still learning to trust the body that had almost killed him. His hand, it was pressed flat against the left side of his chest, just sitting there, his palm over his heart, like a man checking that something precious had not slipped away while he wasn't watching. She had seen that gesture before. She had done it herself, in the hospital corridor, after the machines changed their sound, after she had signed the forms with a pen someone had pressed into her shaking hand. She had walked out of that hospital and pressed her own palm flat against her own chest, not because anything was wrong with her heart, but because she needed to feel something still beating. She had stood in the car park and pressed her hand to her chest for 11 minutes. She knew what that gesture meant. It meant, I almost wasn't here. She did not approach him. She sat back down on her bench, wrapped both hands around her cold coffee, and told herself it meant nothing. That it was a coincidence. That the park was full of people and she had no business watching strangers. She watched him anyway. And she would spend the next several months trying to understand why a stranger's hand pressed to his own heart felt like the most familiar thing she had seen in 14 months. She would not understand it until the letter. 3 years earlier, Enzo Reyes was 20 years old and completely, catastrophically alive. He played football the way fire burns, not because it chose to, but because stopping was not in its nature. He was San Lucas FC's starting striker, the kind of player coaches built systems around, and opponents studied footage of at midnight. He was the kind of player crowds came early to watch warm-up, not because he did anything spectacular during warm-up, just because there was something in the way he moved, a quality of intention, of absolute commitment to every single step that made watching him feel like watching something that could not last. He was right. It could not. He had known since he was 19. The cardiologist's office in Manila smelled of antiseptic and old air conditioning. The doctor was a small, precise man who delivered catastrophic news with the exact same voice he might use to read a weather forecast, and Enzo had sat in the chair across the desk and listened to the word hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and watched the doctor's mouth keep moving and felt the sound of it all slide sideways like a table being tilted, everything sliding toward the edge. His heart walls were thickening. The muscle was growing in the wrong direction. The heart was, in its fierce and stupid loyalty to itself, making itself too large to function, building walls so thick they were strangling the very chambers they were meant to protect. One day, the doctor said it would stop. Not yet, but one day. How long do I have? Enzo asked. The doctor did not answer the way Enzo wanted. He spoke about management, monitoring medication, the importance of reducing exertion. How long? Enzo said again, very quietly, can I play? A pause. That, the doctor said carefully, is not a question I can answer with any accuracy. Enzo drove to the training ground that afternoon and ran until the sky turned purple. He ran until his vision narrowed to a tunnel and his lungs burned and his legs stopped obeying properly, and still he ran, not away from the diagnosis, but at it, as though he could outpace it, as though speed were an argument his body could make against the verdict of its own cells. He did not tell anyone. Not his coach, who would have pulled him from the squad immediately. Not his teammates, who would have looked at him differently with that specific pity that ruins everything it touches. Not his mother, who sat in the same spot in the stands every match and called him afterward with the same first words, Nagalala Ako Saio. I worried about you, as though she already sensed the shape of what she could not name. He did not tell anyone because the moment he told someone it became real in a way his own body experiencing it could not make it. The moment someone else knew, he became a sick man. And he refused, with every stubborn, burning cell in him, to become that before he absolutely had to. He played another full season. It was the best football of his life. He knew, even as he played it, that he was burning through something finite, that every match was a transaction, a withdrawal from an account that was already dangerously low. He knew it, and he played. Anyway, harder, faster, more completely than he had ever played before, because the knowing made every moment on that pitch the most alive he had ever been. His mother watched from the stands. Her hands were always clasped. She always called. He always said, "I'm fine, Mama."
He was not fine.
But he was not ready to stop being fine yet. Marco Villanueva had a laugh that arrived before he did. It was the first thing Bianca Santos had noticed about him, not his face, not the way he moved with the ball, but the sound of his laughter coming around the corner of the corridor outside the team's training room, full and uncalculated and completely without self-consciousness. The laugh of a man who had not yet learned to perform joy instead of feel it. She had been 17. He had been 17. She had been standing outside the training room waiting for her brother, and he had come around the corner mid-laugh and nearly knocked her flat, and the laugh had stopped, and he had looked at her and said, with remarkable composure for someone who had just almost bowled a stranger over, "Are you okay?" "You nearly killed me," she said. "I did apologize," he pointed out, "mostly through the collision itself." She had not meant to laugh. She did anyway. That was how it started. That was always how it started with Marco. Something accidental, something unplanned, something that arrived before you could decide whether to let it in.
He was not the star of the team.
He was never the star. He was a midfielder, the kind of player who made stars possible, who read the game 3 moves ahead and positioned himself in the exact place the ball needed to go before anyone else had decided to send it
there.
He was the player coaches praised in meetings and crowds, overlooked during matches, and teammates privately credited for everything that worked. He and Bianca loved each other the way rivers love the sea, not dramatically, not in great crashing waves, but in a steady, inexorable moving toward a current that knew its direction even when it could not explain why. They watched a documentary together one Sunday evening in March, 2 years after the collision in the corridor, 18 months after the first date, 1 year after she had quietly, without ceremony, moved the spare key from the hook beside her door to the pocket of his training bag. The documentary was about organ donation, about families who had said yes in the worst moment of their lives and spent the rest of those lives wondering if it had been the right thing,
about
recipients who carried someone else's continuation inside them and
did not know what to do with that weight.
Bianca had cried a little. She cried at documentaries. Marco had given her his sleeve, which she had used without comment, which was its own kind of intimacy. In the quiet after, he had said, casually looking at the ceiling, the way he said serious things when he was trying to make them sound smaller than they were, "If anything ever happened to me, I'd want them to use everything." "Stop it," she said immediately. "I mean it. You're 22 and healthy, and I'm not having this conversation." Bianca. Marco. He had looked at her then. That round, kind face. Those soft, dark eyes that always looked a little like they were smiling even when they were not. He had looked at her, and then he had leaned over and pressed a kiss to her temple. Warm, certain, unhurried. "Okay," he said. "Not having it." She never forgot it, though. She filed it away in the place where you keep the things people say that feel too large to examine directly. 14 days later, he was dead. There was no warning. That was the thing that broke her most. Not the death itself, though. The death was unsurvivable, but the absence of warning, the ordinary texture of the days before it, the fact that the morning of the Tuesday in March had begun like every other morning, his training bag by the door, his coffee cup in the drying rack, the sound of his key in the lock as he left. She had not said anything significant when he left. She had said, "Don't forget you have that thing at 3. He had said, "I know." She had said, "I'll see you tonight." He had said, "Yeah." That was the last conversation. He collapsed on the training pitch at 11:43 in the morning. Cardiac arrest, sudden, catastrophic, without precedent in his medical history. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already unreachable. He lasted 3 days in the ICU, and Bianca was there for all three of them, sleeping in the plastic chair, holding his hand, talking to him in the soft, continuous voice of someone who understood that he might not hear her, but needed to
Speak anyway.
She told him everything she had not said that morning. She told him she had known since they were 17. She told him the key was still in his training bag. She told him he was going to be fine because someone had to believe it, and she had always been the one who believed hardest. She was there when the machines changed their sound. The doctor came. The words came. They were the words you know are coming but cannot prepare for, because no amount of bracing makes them land any softer. She nodded.
She signed.
Someone pressed a pen into her hand, and she signed the organ donation forms on the counter of the nurse's station, and then she walked out of the hospital into the gray afternoon and stood in the car park and pressed her palm flat against her own chest. Something's still beating. Something's still here. She drove home. She sat in the dark of the apartment for 4 hours without turning a light on. The training bag was still by the door. His coffee cup was still in the drying rack. Everything was exactly where it had been that morning when he had said, "Yeah, I'll see you tonight," and left. She had not put his jersey away. 14 months later, she still had not put his jersey away. Enzo's heart finally made its decision on a Thursday afternoon in October during a training match that should have been routine. He had felt it coming for 3 weeks, not pain exactly, more like a heaviness that arrived in his chest each morning and sat there through the day, a fullness that had nothing to do with breathing.
He had pushed through it.
He had always pushed through it. That was what he did.
He made it to halftime.
He sat on the bench. His vision went gray at the edges. He thought, this is it. He thought it without drama, without fear, just the flat recognition of an event he had spent 3 years anticipating. He put his hand on his chest. Then the world went sideways. They told him later he had been unconscious for 4 minutes. It had felt like nothing, no darkness, no tunnel, no cinematic light. Just halftime, and then the ceiling of a hospital corridor, and then his mother's face, which was the most frightened he had ever seen it. And that was the thing that broke through the numbness that the situation had produced in him. Her face. "Mama," he said. She could not speak. She pressed his hand to her mouth and shook. He had done this. His silence had done this. He looked at the face of the woman who had called him after every single match for 3 years. "Nagalala, Ako Saio, I worried about you and understood for the first time what his secret had cost her.
Not just now.
Every
Single day.
"I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you." She pressed his hand harder against her mouth and nodded. Her eyes were closed. In the hospital, the cardiologist delivered the verdict with the same weatherman calm Enzo remembered from 3 years earlier. The heart had reached its crisis point. A transplant was now not a future consideration but an immediate necessity. He would be placed on the
list.
They would wait. "My season," Enzo started, "is over," the doctor said. "Your career at the professional level." A pause. "I am sorry. I know what that means to you." Enzo lay in the hospital bed that night with his mother asleep in the chair beside him, her hand loose around his, and the room full of flowers from teammates who did not know what to say, and he stared at the ceiling and felt, for the first time in 3 years, the specific terror of someone who had been very brave for a very long time and had finally run out of the room to be brave in. He put his hand on his chest. His heart beat. Irregular. Labored.
Trying.
Still trying. He was 38 days on the transplant list. On the 39th day, the call came at 2 in the morning.
He
was dressed and in the hospital corridor within 40 minutes, his mother beside him, neither of them speaking, both of them fully aware of what the call at 2 in the morning meant. that somewhere in the city, another family was in the worst night of their lives. He wanted to say, "I am sorry for your loss." He had no one to say it to. He let them open his chest and put someone else's heart inside it. He woke up changed. They do not tell you who the donor was. Medical protocol. Privacy. The right of a grieving family not to be visited by the person who is alive because of their worst night. Enzo understood this. He accepted it. He was grateful for the anonymity on both sides. He was not sure he was ready to know the name of what he was carrying, but something was different. It began in the recovery room, a restlessness he could not name, a sense of direction without destination, as though his body was now oriented toward something it had not been oriented toward before. He wrote it off as medication. Disorientation. The strangeness of a chest that felt, for the first time in years, genuinely open. But the feeling did not leave. It intensified in small, strange ways. He would be in the middle of rehabilitation, careful, monitored, the cardiologist watching every reading, and something would move through him like a wave. Not pain, not discomfort. Something quieter and more bewildering than either. Something that felt absurdly like homesickness for a place he had never been. He said nothing about it. He was a man who had spent 3 years saying nothing. Silence was what he knew. By 9 months post-surgery, he was jogging again.
Carefully.
With a monitor strapped to his chest and the cardiologist walking alongside him, not running, just walking, keeping pace. And the morning he first kicked a ball again, properly, with real force, against a real net, he bent double afterward and stayed bent for a long time. His cardiologist put a hand on his back. "Are you in pain?" "No," Enzo said.
His voice was strange. Thick.
"Are you?" "Give me a minute," he said. The cardiologist gave him a minute. He was not crying. He was not sure what he was doing. Something had moved through him when the ball hit the net. A wave, as he had no other word for it. A wave of something that had no name and no clear origin. A grief that was not entirely his own. He straightened up. He put his hand on his chest. The heart was beating, strong and steady in a way his own heart had not beaten in years. Someone had given him this. Someone had been in a hospital room, the way he had been in a hospital room, and they had made a decision in the worst moment of their life, and here he was, on a football pitch, kicking a ball, bent double under the weight of being alive. "Thank you," he said, quietly, to no one he could name. The cardiologist pretended not to hear. The rehabilitation center was beside a park where the local amateur league played Saturday morning matches, informal, good-natured games. Families on the grass, a fish-ball vendor who arrived at 7:30 and was sold out by 9. It was the fish-ball smell that made Bianca come back. She had walked through the park on a Thursday, just a shortcut, not a destination, and the smell had hit her, and her body had stopped before her mind caught up with it, because Marco had eaten those fish balls after every Saturday match, standing by the vendor's carton, his kit still muddy, completely content. He had eaten them with the specific, uncomplicated joy of a man who had just done exactly what he
Was built to do.
She had stood on the park path on that Thursday, smelling the fish balls from the cart 20 meters away, and she had not been able to move for 2 full minutes. She came back on Saturday. She told herself she was just walking. She was not watching the match. She was not sitting on the bench across from the rehabilitation center because some part of her needed to be in a place that smelled like him on a Saturday morning. She sat on the bench. She bought a coffee she did not drink. She watched the midfielder section of the pitch because that was where she always looked. The man across the path from her was sitting outside the rehabilitation center, watching the match with his forearms on his knees still. He had lean shoulders and warm brown skin and thick black hair that needed cutting. She did not particularly notice him, but she came back the following Saturday, and he was there again, and the Saturday after that. On the 4th Saturday, it rained. She sat in the rain because she did not notice it immediately, and By the time she did, she had already decided she did not care, and there was something about the rain that felt appropriate, like the weather had finally caught up with the internal state she had been walking around in for 14 months. She heard footsteps on the path. She did not look up. An umbrella opened over her. She looked up then. The man from across the path stood there, holding the umbrella with one hand, looking down at her with the expression of someone who had crossed a path on an impulse they hadn't entirely authorized. "You're getting wet," he said. "I know," she said. A pause. The rain came down around the umbrella perimeter.
He sat down.
Not close, not invasive, just down. On the other end of the bench, with the umbrella tilted to cover both of them, and the rain between them and the silence between them, and neither of them performing anything at all. "I'm Enzo," he said. "Bianca." They watched the match for a few minutes without speaking. It was the specific silence of two people who have both, separately, stopped performing, who have nothing left to spend on small talk, and have discovered, to their mild surprise, that the silence is not uncomfortable. "You have someone in the league?" he asked. A pause long enough to be its own answer. "I used to," she said. He did not press. She noticed that immediately, the deliberate restraint of it, the way he received the information, and did not push through it toward more. Most people pushed. Most people asked follow-up questions with their faces even when they kept their mouths closed. This man simply accepted the boundaries she had drawn and looked back at the pitch. "You had surgery," she said after a while. He looked at her. A quick, sharp look. "How do you know?" "The way you move. The way you sit."
A pause.
"I've spent time in hospitals. You learn to read it." He was quiet for a moment. "Heart," he said. It was not a question, but she heard it as one. "Mine too," she said softly. "Sort of." He looked at her. She looked at the pitch. The rain came down. The game ended. They went their separate ways, without exchanging numbers, without making arrangements, without any of the standard language of two people who intend to see each other again. But she came back the following Saturday, and he was there. It happened slowly, the way all the most irreversible things happen. Saturday mornings. The bench. Sometimes coffee. Once, famously, in the private history of the two of them that was already beginning to accumulate without either of them agreeing to let it, fish balls, which Bianca had not eaten since Marco died and which she ate now, because Enzo had bought 2 skewers from the vendor without asking, and held one out, and she had taken it before she thought about it. She took one bite and stopped. He noticed. He looked at her face. He did not say anything. "Sorry," she said. These are," she stopped. "We can throw them away," he said simply.
"No."
She took another bite. A deliberate one.
"No."
"It's fine. They're just fish balls." They ate them in silence. She cried a little, just at the corners of her eyes, which she dealt with by looking firmly at the pitch. He looked firmly at the pitch too. It was, she would think later, one of the kindest things anyone had done for her in 14 months. Not the fish balls. The looking away. The giving her room to feel it without making her perform gratitude for his witnessing of it. They talked about things. Slowly, as people talk when they have learned caution, layering information like sediment each session. Depositing a little more. She told him she was a grade school teacher. He told her he had been a professional footballer. Past tense.
She
noticed the past tense and filed it carefully beside the surgery and the rehabilitation center and the hand pressed to his chest. She told him she had lost someone. He told her he had almost been someone who was lost. "Does the transplant change you?" she asked one morning. She had not planned the question. It arrived fully formed, and she asked it
before she could decide not to.
He thought about it for a long time. Genuinely thought about it. The way he considered things, with his whole body going still. "There's something," he said. "Something I can't explain. Like a direction. Like I was pointed one way before, and now I'm pointed somewhere else, and I don't know whose decision that was." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Do you think about the donor? She asked. All the time, he said. Every day. I don't know who they were.
I'm
Not supposed to. But I think about what it cost someone to make that
call.
what they were going through, who they were giving it up for. Her hands tightened around the cup. It's good, she said, very carefully, that you think about it. You said that like you know something about it, he said. She said nothing. He looked at her profile. She looked at the pitch. He let it go. He was learning the map of her silences. Which ones meant wait, and which ones meant ask, and which ones meant this is not mine to
Give you yet.
This one meant all three. It was a Tuesday in November that nearly destroyed everything. She had taken a different route through the park. Not to avoid the bench, she told herself, just a different route, and she had passed the fountain at the center of the park and sat down on the bench. There, alone, because it was a gray afternoon and she was tired in the specific way that grief makes you tired. Not physically, but in the soul, a weariness that sleep cannot touch. She had been carrying something for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the conversation about the donor. 3 weeks of turning it over in her mind, all the angles, all the implications, all the questions that had no clean answer. Was it him she was drawn to? The echo of Marco, somehow carried forward in the body of a stranger? Was that not a kind of madness? To be on a bench with a man and be drawn there partly by what he contained without knowing? Was she using Enzo? Was she using Marco? Was she betraying Marco by feeling something for a man who carried his heart? Was she betraying Enzo by not telling him? Was any of it real? She sat at the fountain and asked herself the question she had been avoiding for 3 weeks, the question that sat at the center of everything like a stone. Am I drawn to who he is, or to who I have lost? She did not have an answer, but she had a decision. And the decision she made, sitting at the fountain in the gray November afternoon, was this. She would stop going to the bench. It was not fair. Not to him, not to herself, not to Marco's memory. She was compromised. She could not trust her own feelings when they were built on a foundation of secrets and grief and the terrible coincidence of a heart that had moved from one chest to another.
She
Would stop going. She would find a different route to wherever she was going on Saturday mornings. She would. You look like you're having an argument with yourself. She spun around. Enzo was standing on the path behind the bench, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at her with the expression she had come to recognize as his particular form of attention, complete, patient, impossible to deflect. You followed me, she said, and heard how it sounded as she said it. I was walking. I saw you sitting here looking like someone told you the world was ending. How long were you standing there? Long enough to be concerned. She looked at him. He looked at her. The fountain made its sound. Between them. Sit down, she said, because she could not think of anything else
to say. He sat down.
For a long time neither of them spoke. The park was nearly empty. A child ran past with a dog. A bird made noise in the tree above them. I'm going to stop coming to the bench, she said finally. He went very still. Okay, he said. Don't do that. Don't just say, okay. What do you want me to say? I don't know. She pressed her hands together in her lap.
Something.
Ask me why. Push back. Something. If you want to tell me why, tell me, he said. I'm not going to pull it out of you. She looked at him. His face was entirely still, not cold, not wounded, just present. Waiting. I have a secret, she said. Something I know that involves
you.
And I don't know if I should tell you. And I don't know if the way I feel about coming to this park on Saturdays is real, or if it's just, she stopped, pressed her lips together. I don't know if I'm here for you or for something else. He was quiet for a long time. Can I say something? He said finally. Yes. Whatever brought you to that bench the first time, it doesn't matter to me. People come to places for all kinds of reasons.
You stayed.
You kept coming back. That's not nothing. You don't know the whole picture. No, he said. I don't. But I know you.
He paused.
A little.
I
Know a little of you. And what I know is, he stopped. Started again. Don't make this decision right now. Whatever it is you're carrying, you don't have to hand it to me today. But don't disappear either. Not yet.
She looked at the fountain.
The stone at the center of her chest had not moved, but it was, perhaps, very slightly less cold. Okay, she said. Okay. I won't disappear.
Yet.
He made a small sound that in another context might have been a laugh. They sat at the fountain for another hour, not talking much, while the gray afternoon turned into early evening and the park emptied. Around them, she did not disappear. Her mother came on a Saturday afternoon in late November. She arrived with food. She always arrived with food, as though the right meal could address anything, and she sat across from Bianca at the small kitchen table and watched her daughter move through the apartment with the careful efficiency of someone who has organized their grief into a manageable system. The jersey still on the pillow, the coffee cup still in the cabinet where it always was, the key still on the hook, because she had never been able to decide what to do with it. You seem different, her mother said. I'm fine. Different isn't a criticism. A pause. You seem less, she searched for the word. Les stopped. Bianca sat down across from her, looked at her hands. I've been going to the park on Saturdays, she said.
There's
someone. A man. He had a heart transplant.
He's been
rehabilitating. We've been, she did not know what word to use, talking. Her mother was very still.
A heart transplant, she said.
He's a footballer.
Was.
He can't play professionally anymore, but she noticed her mother's face. Mama. What is it? Her mother put her hand into her bag. She moved slowly, with the deliberateness of someone who has been carrying something they did not know how to hand over. She placed a letter on the table between them. It was an envelope, official, with a hospital return address. It had been opened. The postmark was 14 months ago. The hospital sent it, her mother said, in the weeks after. You weren't in a place where I could reach you with things like this. I meant to show you. I kept meaning to show you.
And
then every time I looked at you, I thought. She stopped. I couldn't find the right moment. And then the moment stopped coming.
And I
kept carrying it. Bianca looked at the envelope. She did not pick it up yet. What is it? It's from the transplant team, her mother said. A recipient letter. Anonymous. They don't use names. But they include, she swallowed. They include the general timeline, the type of surgery, the hospital. Bianca picked up the letter. She read it. She read it again. And then she sat at the kitchen table and did not move for a very long time while her mother reached across and covered her shaking hands with both of hers and did not say a single word, because there was nothing in the language of mothers or grief or love that was adequate to this particular moment. The timeline matched. The surgery matched. The hospital matched. It was him. The man on the bench. The man with the hand pressed to his chest. The man who had bought her fish balls and looked away while she cried and told her not to disappear. He was carrying Marco's heart. He had been carrying it the whole time. And she had known him for 2 months without knowing. And now she knew. And she had absolutely no idea what to do. She did not sleep. Not the first night, not the second. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and let the things settle over her in layers, because it was too large to take in all at once and had to be approached in pieces. The way you approach something enormous in the dark, carefully, with your hands out in front of you, feeling for the edges. The question came on the 3rd day, arriving with the specific inevitability of a thing that had been building since the beginning. Am I drawn to who he is or to who I have lost? She asked it the way you ask a question you are terrified to answer. Honestly. She asked it again on the 4th day.
And the 5th.
By the 6th day, she was not asking the question. She was sitting with it, learning its shape, understanding that it could not be answered in the abstract, that the only way to know was to do the thing she was most afraid of, which was to be honest. Was it Marco? She closed her eyes and thought about Enzo. not what he carried. Him. The way he sat. The way he listened with his whole body.
The
Way he had looked away when she cried over fish balls. The way he had said don't disappear at the fountain when she had been ready to vanish. The way he made her feel on Saturday mornings like she was a person and not just the aftermath of a person. Was that Marco? It did not feel like Marco. Marco had felt like home. This felt like a door she had not known existed, standing open in the middle of a wall she had thought was solid. It felt like him. Just him. A different him. She understood by the 8th day that this was not a question she could answer from her bed. She had to go back. She had to sit with him again and know it, know what she was sitting beside, and feel what she felt, and be honest about what that was. She went back on Saturday. She had thought about telling him on the bench. She had thought about telling him on the walk home. She had thought about every version of it, the careful version, the clinical version, the version where she led with the letter and let the facts do the work, the version where she led with how she felt and let the facts follow, and she had decided, finally, that none of those versions were right because all of them were still performances. All of them were still Bianca managing the information to manage his reaction. She called him on a Sunday morning in December. "Meet me at the park," she said. "Not the bench. The fountain."
he came.
She had Marco's jersey with her, folded in her lap. He looked at it when he sat down. He did not say anything about it. "I'm going to tell you something," she said. "And I need you to let me get through all of it before you react."
Can you do that?
He nodded. She told him everything. Not cleanly. It came in pieces unevenly, with pauses where the words stopped and she had to find them again. She told him about
Marco.
not the death, not first. First she told him about the laugh, the collision in the corridor, the key in the training bag. She told him who Marco was before she told him what happened to Marco because she needed Enzo to understand what had been lost before she told him what had been given. Then she told him about the Tuesday. Then she told him about the forms. Then she told him about the letter. She watched his face change as the pieces assembled themselves into the shape of the truth. He went completely still. Not the careful, patient stillness she had come to know.
Something
Different. Something with more dimensions to it.
His jaw tightened.
And his eyes moved from her face to the jersey in her lap and then back to her face, and he said nothing for a long time, and she sat with the nothing and did not try to fill it because she had said what she had to say, and now it was his. "Enzo," she said finally. "Give me a minute," he said. She gave him a minute. He stood up. She did not speak. She watched him walk 3 steps away and stand with his back to her, one hand pressed to the back of his neck, the other flat against his chest in the gesture she had recognized from the very beginning, the gesture that had been the beginning of all of it. When he turned back, his eyes were bright.
His jaw was still tight.
"Why are you telling me this?" he said. Not angry.
Raw.
"Because you deserve to know. Or because you needed to confess it." The words landed. She absorbed them. "Both," she said honestly. "Both things are true." He looked at her. "Do you know what it's like," he said, very quietly, "to be told that? The thing you've been feeling, the thing you couldn't explain, the direction, the wave, that it has a name? That it had a reason?
That
There was a person," he stopped. His voice was fraying at the edges. "There was a person." "There was a person," she said. "And he loved you." "Yes. And I have his." He pressed his hand harder against his chest. "Yes," she whispered. He sat back down. They sat in the silence of it for a long time. The fountain made its
sound.
The park was gray and December quiet around them. "I came back because of you," she said. "Not because of him. I need you to hear that." On the 8th day, when I was lying in bed running through every angle of this, trying to figure out if what I feel when I'm here is grief or something real, it was you I kept coming back to. Not Marco. Not the transplant.
You.
The way you looked away when I cried. The way you said don't disappear. The way she
stopped.
It's you. I need to know if that's enough. If that's okay. Or if this is, her voice broke a little. If this is too strange to survive. He was looking at the jersey in her lap. He reached out slowly and touched it. Just his fingertips. Just for a moment. The fabric of it, worn and dark blue. The number visible. At the fold. He was a midfielder, he said. Yes. Steady player. The kind who holds the team together. She nodded. That's a good heart to have, he said softly. That kind of heart. She could not speak. He took his hand back. He straightened. He looked at her directly. For a long moment. I don't know what this is, he said. I don't know what it means. Or what it makes us or what we're supposed to do with it. But I know what it's like to come back to something every Saturday when you didn't plan to. And I know that thing, he paused. That thing
Is you.
not the story. Not what I'm carrying.
You.
She looked at him. He would have liked you, she said. And meant it completely. Yeah. He liked people who ran at things when they were afraid. Enzo thought about the training ground at dusk. About drills run. Until vision blurred. About a hand pressed to his chest in a hospital corridor at 2 a.m. I'm afraid of plenty, he said. I know, she said. But you run anyway. He reached out. Not for the jersey this time.
For her hand.
She let him take it. Truth does not resolve things. That is the lie stories tell. Truth makes a clearing. What grows in the clearing depends on the people and the season and how much patience they can afford. They kept their Saturday mornings. They kept walking. They kept talking more honestly now with the shape of the whole thing visible between them, no longer navigating around the shadow of it. It was not smooth. There were Saturdays when she arrived at the bench already having cried because grief does not observe a schedule, and the fact that something new was growing did not mean the old thing had finished its business with her. He learned to read those Saturdays and adjusted accordingly. Less talk, more presence, coffee without
Commentary.
There were Sundays when he went quiet in the middle of a sentence because something had moved through his chest in that inexplicable, wave-like way, and he was not yet sure how to talk about it without it sounding like something it was not. Tell me, she said once, on one of those Sundays. It's hard to explain without it. Tell me anyway. So he told her about the wave, about the day he had kicked the ball and bent double. She cried when he told her, not loud, not dramatic, the soft, inevitable kind, and he let her, and she was not crying about Marco exactly. She was crying about what Marco had become, a wave in a football field, in a man she was slowly and honestly and carefully falling for. He came to the cemetery with her once. He stood at the gate while she walked to the headstone. He did not offer to accompany her. He stood at the gate with his hands in his pockets and looked at the trees and waited, giving her the private space of it entirely. When she came back, her eyes were red and her hands were cold, and he offered his arm, and she took it without a word, and they walked out of the cemetery and into the ordinary afternoon, two people who had each found a way back to the world through the other.
Thank you, she said.
For coming. Of course, he said. You didn't have to.
Bianca.
He looked at her. I wanted to. She tightened her hand on his arm. They walked. He played again. Not professionally. That door had closed and he had learned, at last, to stand at the closed door without trying to break it down. He played in the amateur league. Saturday mornings. The park. The fishball vendor was there every week, and Enzo had a standing order of 2 skewers, which he never had to explain to Bianca, and she never asked him to.
She came to the games.
She stood at the side of the pitch with her coffee going cold in both hands, and when the match started, she watched the midfielders. Position, old habit, old love, and then she caught herself and smiled at herself for catching herself, and shifted her gaze to where he was. He always knew where she was. He never looked, but he always knew. Once, after a game, he scored a simple tap-in, nothing spectacular, but the sound the small crowd made was warm and real, and he stood there for a moment with his arms slightly open, breathing, and he pressed his hand to his chest in the old gesture, the one she had recognized from the very beginning.
She saw it from the sideline.
She pressed her own hand to her own chest. Something still beating. Something still here. On a Saturday evening in January, walking home through the park in the gold light of late afternoon, she asked him, "Do you ever feel him,
Marco.
inside you?" He considered the question with the honesty she had come to love. About him, not rushing toward an easy answer, actually sitting with it.
I feel something, he said.
I've stopped trying to figure out whose it is. I think maybe it's both. Maybe that's okay. She slipped her hand into his. I think so too, she said. And they walked through the gold light, through the park where the amateur league had packed up and gone home, through the city that was beginning its evening without them. Two people carrying between them two loves and two losses and one heart that had learned, against all odds, to beat in a different chest, and kept going, and kept going, and kept going, and kept going. Two hearts, one story, and the question that lived at the center of it. Am I drawn to who you are, or to who I have lost? Maybe you have asked yourself that question. Maybe you are asking it right now. Maybe you read this story and recognized something in it. A bench, a gesture, a letter you were not ready for, a person you kept going back to without knowing why. You are not alone in that. Romance Heartflix TV exists for exactly that reason. To tell the stories that make you feel less alone in the complicated, costly, extraordinary business of loving people. Subscribe to our channel so the next story finds you the same way this one did. And leave a comment below. Have you ever loved someone whose heart was already somewhere else? Or loved someone new while still carrying someone you lost? Tell us your story. This community was built for it. Like,
Subscribe. Share.
and keep going.